Hello and welcome to IT Chronicles 10 in Tech. I'm here with Shane Carlson and Ryan Schmier. My name's Carlos Casanova. And we're welcoming Eric Robertson from CollabNet and version 1, I guess, sort of a combination role you're filling now. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here.
So Eric, I guess I want to touch base on, pretty recently you guys put out the State of Agile report. A lot of great content in there. Why don't you tell us, sort of at the high level what that is and what it's got in it?
Yeah, so I'll kind of give you an executive summary. One of the interesting things is that the reasons around for adopting Agile, that's kind of changed a little bit from the last time that we did the report. So about 75%, they went in and one of the major reasons why they wanted to go into adopt Agile was to accelerate software delivery. And 64% was around managing changing priorities. And then what's interesting is now this number has increased 49% better business IT alignment. It's very interesting because I mentioned that first number, that first metric around accelerate software delivery. So it's not just all about you that you're bringing to the customer. And also how does that actually align to the business priorities and initiatives that are set up. And so that alignment and that end-to-end and that visibility is something that they're seeing as a benefit because it allows them to basically manage changing priorities. I believe 71% to do that. And that project visibility is 66%. But that 65%, and this is a number that really increased, was that business IT alignment. And that's something that's very interesting, and that's what we're starting to see is that more of that alignment between the business, the technology, and the customer.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you mentioned that. I've been having a lot of conversations with customers, and obviously it's been very kind of in the forefront of conversations in the industry. For the last 4 or 5 years, when we talk about DevOps, the conversation always revolves around velocity. It always revolves around efficiency. And recently, and I'd say, very recently in the last 6 months to a year, we're really starting to see a focus on, kind of that value flow conversation. And it's like, fast is good, more features faster, more productivity is good, but let's start linking, these releases and this velocity back to, net benefit gains for business outcomes and things of that nature. How are you seeing customers kind of approach, linking this velocity and this DevOps activity back to business value? And what does that look like?
So, the approach that we're seeing, and this is really kind of coming out of some of the scaling agile type of initiatives that they're doing, like SAFe. And it's this notion of value stream, which is nothing new, right? It's from lean manufacturing metrics. And essentially it represents the steps that an organization really uses to build solutions and provide that continuous flow of value to a customer. So being able to map that out from an idea all the way, just even beyond delivery, but actually what is the customer experience around that? And that was another interesting metric, was customer satisfaction was of utmost importance as well that came out of the State of Agile report. So being able to link those, look at the process, link that together, model that, and then be able to put metrics around that. Metrics of value is really what we're seeing customers.
Right. So yeah, it's interesting because myself as well, Shane, the last 6 to 12 months is when we've been hearing more of that connection, I guess. I think for some of us that have been in this space for a while, we've always talked about it. So I kind of get frustrated when I hear, oh my God, look how great of an idea this is, and we scratch our heads, say, well, really? That's not a new thing, but. Okay, fine. I guess if you must, but what I do find a little interesting is when they put the new names on it. So now it's value stream mapping, right? It is some of these things I don't recognize by name, but then when they start describing it, it's like, oh yeah, I've seen that before. So, I guess can you expound a little bit more on how they go about that? How do they connect that, get to a realized value? We call it customer satisfaction. I'm hearing, realized value as a term now.
Right. So if I think about it, it's basically 4 buckets. It's value capture, value creation, value delivery, and then the value measurement and visibility. So the value capture is usually where you're kind of seeing, and work is more from the business side, where that's where you're setting up your strategy, you're setting portfolio. Again, nothing new here, right? I mean, we've been doing this for years in the industry. It's a newer name being applied to it. But what's interesting is that now being mapped to more of the teams, and what the teams are doing is they're using tools to basically manage their teams and managing their artifacts, managing their user stories and defects. And then that gets codified, right? That gets turned over to developer, that gets developed. And then it gets put into different environments, maybe get packaged up, let's say using container technologies or whatever. But usually that piece is what's lost. It's how do I map the strategy and the portfolio and my epics and my user stories? How do I know what user stories are where in what environments and packages and artifacts that are packaged up? Where are they? Are they being blocked? Have they gone through proper testing, proper security? What is that blockage? How can I easily identify it? So that's the new piece, that linkage there. That's really the value around that. Is my backlog is very valuable, right? Is that backlog made up of defects, or is that made up of new user stories that's going to deliver key capabilities to my customer? So be able to link that together and deliver that in a value stream or end to end is that linkage that we're referring to.
Yeah, that's a great point on linkage. And you also mentioned that it's not only process that's changing, but tools are changing as well. I've noticed that Agile as a concept and even DevOps has been around for a few years now. And we're starting to see the normal iteration of people beginning to refresh it, call it new things, and refine it a little bit. Has the definition in terms of what success looks like changed? And are people measuring that success differently than they did before to try and justify continued investment in these changes? What are you seeing?
That's an excellent point. It's kind of interesting because you mentioned this point where traditionally the DevOps was people went out and they got these tools because a lot of these tools were open source. So they said, don't worry about it. It's not going to cost you anything. Let me just go ahead and put it into my environment. And when you start doing that, it may work for that type of project or the application that they're doing. But when it comes to scaling, that's when it becomes a little bit more problematic for organizations. And so DevOps in that term has been kind of forced to grow up now and to be able to justify. So they have to showing how can we ensure that we're able to scale this? How can we ensure that we're able to measure, let's say, cycle time, wait time, bottlenecks, and more importantly, track that business value through the delivery cycle, right? And again, I kind of mentioned that end-to-end traceability because it's interesting. About 83% of the respondents, when they talked about value, capability, or improvement in the DevOps, end-to-end traceability from a business initiative through development, test, and deployment was very, very key. Of course, automation is there, but if you automate something that doesn't bring business value, it's not really worth anything, right? So automation was a big initiative for the past couple of years. You see automation as being a very key metric for driving what they consider success in that. But that's kind of going down in the sequence. It's now more about, how can I identify my risk? How do I look at my auditing compliance, especially with a lot of regulated industries that we're starting to see as well, and looking at these control points. So it's being asked to things that, again, to go to Carl's point, things we've been looking at from an enterprise as a developer is now being applied in the DevOps world as well now.
So I know a lot of times, some of the heat that DevOps takes is that so much of the conversation revolves around the technology and automation and everything. And that's where a lot of people tend to get very excited because there is a tremendous amount of inefficiency that can be, driven out through automation and through leveraging the tools that are out there. If you were to give advice to kind of anybody who's, entering DevOps or entering a new phase of DevOps and trying to evolve things, outside of focusing on the technology, focusing on the automation gains, what would you tell them? I mean, what's the one piece of advice you'd leave them with?
Organizational cultural matters. And in fact, we heard this, I believe, that was something that we heard from actually customers. They actually told us that organizational culture matters. the technology and tools is one thing, but someone famous said, I don't want to take credit for the quote, but they said, culture eats strategy and technology for breakfast, right? I may be adding some additional words there, but essentially it is being able to have everyone on board in an organizational structure that really understands the success and adopting not only the DevOps piece, but the Agile pieces around that, the Agile DevOps pieces, in order to make that scalable.
Excellent. Well, Eric, thank you very much for your time with us today. It's actually been very valuable. It's always interesting to kind of get the pulse of the industry and customers and non-customers around, things like DevOps, and kind of see what people actually say when you aggregate that information together. I know each of us kind of spent a lot of time anecdotally talking to people about it. So thank you for joining us today, and I wish you luck in the industry.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.